Hello, we are in our Friday devotional on the Sea of Galilee. Yet again, we will be here for 2 more days in our Lenten study. This week, it's been surrounding fishermen and bait and water and how Jesus spent so much of his ministry in the Sea of Galilee. So, our Friday devotion from Adam Hamilton comes from Matthew chapter 14, and I'll be reading verses 22 through 27. This is the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. When evening came, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward the disciples on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." This is the devotional. Once again, we find the disciples in a boat in the midst of the storm. These storms come up with some regularity on the Sea of Galilee, as they do in life. Only this time, Jesus was not in the boat with his disciples. Staying behind on the land to pray, he sent his disciples ahead on the other side of the lake. Once again, it was dark, and the disciples were in the middle of the lake with the wind and the waves buffeting their small boat. This is a well-known story of Jesus walking on the water. Early in the morning, from some distance away, he saw that his friends were struggling, and he went to them to make sure they were okay. Like the disciples, we have times when the wind and the waves buffet us, but Christ sees us in our moment of need and comes to us. There is so much more to the story. After Jesus walked on the water, the disciples looked at each other and asked the question, "Who is this man?" Matthew, whose version of the story is printed above, frequently describes Jesus as one like, but greater than Moses. After all, Moses led the children of Israel through the Red Sea, walking through the water as though it were on dry land. But Jesus walked on the water. Matthew is also clear that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. Matthew's telling of the story, whether he intended it or not, likely conjured up scriptures in the minds of his readers of Job 9, verse 8, which describes God himself as the one who trampled the waves of the sea. Psalm 77, verse 19 notes, "Your way was through the sea, your path through the mighty waters, yet your footprints were unseen." Isaiah 43:16, which states that God makes a way in the sea, a path in the mighty waters. Who is the man who walked on water? He is greater than Moses. In fact, he is none other than God with us in the midst of our fears, our storms, and our darkest nights. I remind our congregation that the part of our church building where the congregation sits is called the nave, from the Latin navis, which means ship. The church has long understood itself to be a ship, an ark in which salvation is found. I love the idea that when we gather for worship, we are in God's ship. Therefore, Jesus comes to meet us, climbs into our boat, and tells us, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." The phrase "do not be afraid" appears 67 times in the Bible, most often either in the lips of his people or in the lips of God's leaders, reminding people that God is with them and they do not need to be afraid. Jesus shouted to his disciples in the midst of the howling winds and the waves, "It is I, do not be afraid." Whether the Lord was asleep on the boat or walking across the water, the disciples did not need to be afraid, for he would watch over them, sail with them in the storms, and somehow find a way to deliver them. And remember, he will deliver you too. So I love this story of Jesus walking in the water, and I just think it's powerful. I actually have a Sunday school craft that I will show you of Jesus walking on the water. It's pretty cute, right? Pretty cute. Jesus walking on the water. So often we forget the God that we have and the God that we serve. We forget that he has done so much more than we could ever ask for or imagine. I think we allow our fear to just overcome us and get the best of us. And so in this scripture passage, I think it is incredibly important to remember to fix our eyes on Jesus, and to remember that we are on the boat with him. So blessings to all of you, and a reminder, do not be afraid.